This man has been on this show 4 times before. And it's not just because I like him a lot. I guess it's because the information he shares with me all of the time is kind of thought-provoking, groundbreaking, all of the above. It's Dr. Bob Winters. Bob, happy Thanksgiving. How are you?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Wonderful to be back with you. I didn't realize I'd been on 4 times before, but I know that every time we've been on, we always go down a rabbit hole and we always, need more time.
This is the truth. Okay, I'm going to kick you off with, look, you earned a chapter in my book, Lessons from the Best.
Thank you for
And
having me in there. I feel very honored to be part of that book. A
well,
lot of great, teachers and pundits, are in that book. I'm just honored to be among, all of those that you put in there. Thanks for having me, in there.
I mean, it'd be an error on my behalf if I admitted you as a chapter. Anyway, you chapter 5 here, and the title of the chapter is Purposeful Intent and Vested Indifference, which is something you said to me way back when, and it's sat with me ever since. And that was how I built this chapter around. But the quote, and for the folks watching on YouTube, you can see there it is. The quote that it's simple, it's profound, it's thought provoking, and it's true. And I want to read this quote to you, and I want you to just react with whatever comes off the top of your head. And we'll kick our conversation about having a solid mindset off from there.
Okay.
Here's your quote. Really great golf is played first in the mind because action follows thought. I'm going to say that again for the listeners and the viewers. Really great golf is played first in the mind because action follows thought. Off you go.
I just think that is the most basic statement
Mhm.
that every golfer needs to hear, listen, and understand exactly what that means because, cause and effect, when we talk about, wow, I hit a great shot, the effect is, the result. But what was the causation factor? And it was because you probably had a very clear picture in your mind or feeling of what you wanted to do, and you gave yourself that permission, that emotional freedom to step in and hit the ball the way that you had already seen it in your mind's eye. And whether you visualized it, you internalized it, you imagined it, it gave you that green light to step in and say, here's really what I'm going to do. So we always think, about, the action, but action follows thought. And when you have a directed mind, it creates a very clear neural pathway for the brain to send a signal to the body to say, here's what we're doing. So that's why I've always said action follows thought. And if your mind's in the right place, your shots will usually go right what you're thinking about.
I want to mind this a bit. And to me, it sort of it loosens the shackles, maybe a little bit physically when the mind is clear and the intent is purposeful, to use your statement. And then the if you have that clear picture, I think the indifference you speak of, in the purposeful intent and vested indifference kind of becomes easy because you know the thing's kind of made already. So all you do is got to swing, and then you can go and play the next one from wherever it lands.
Absolutely. This whole notion about vested indifference, when you take responsibility for the shot, this is what I'm going to do, and you plan it out
Mhm.
and you work your plan, most often, your plan works for you. So when we start talking about having this vested indifference, whatever happens to the result, the outcome, your intention, you have the consolation that saying, my mind was in a great place. When I stepped in to hit that shot, I did exactly what I wanted to do. And you have to be able to accept the result
Yeah.
because the consolation is, I had my mind in the right place. I didn't mean to actually make a physical error because we will make a physical error. But when you have a directed mind, and you have really a clear mind, it actually just sort of paves the way, for fluid and optimal performance. And you just hit the shot you can hit. And I think, when you get your mind in the right place, all the pressure, all the anxiety, all the distractions tend to dissolve because now you're focused here, right now, in this one single golfing event.
Yeah. Look, there's a reason why I started the new year with this podcast from you, because to your point, everything begins in the mind. And in this book too, Hal Sutton, great golfer, major champion, he made the statement too in his typical sort of Louisiana drawl. He speaks with a lot of authority. He's like, every bad shot that's ever happened it happened before the golf club was even swung. So it speaks to your reference about a solid mindset. So to that, Dr. Bob, I'm not going to introduce you. You need no introduction. Folks can go and listen to all the other shows. They can go to your websites and all the rest of it, because I want to dive in,
Okay.
because we're going to talk about now building. And I love your use of the word building, because it sounds like it's doable. Because oftentimes, to me, and a lot of golfers, athletes, whoever, they're like, well, I've got to have a strong mental game. But that's where it ends, because they're like, well, how do you do that? I know I can go and hit balls, or I know I can go and practice in the bunker or whatever. But you're going to tell us and help us how to build a solid mental game. And the word solid, you've cobbled together, crafted this cool little acronym, which is kind of marching orders for us. So let's kick it off. So the S of solid is single minded. And then you just elaborate, focusing on the one shot mindset and being in the moment. So elaborate on that for us, please.
Well, let me give you just a little backstory why I created sort of this solid, why the acronym solid really means something vitally important to all golfers.
All right.
As any great author, speaker, writer, lecturer, I sometimes go even into my reviews and I look at the reviews of other books, whether they're physical instruction books, mental books, psychological treatises, and I will take a look at what, the comments are. And I even looked at all the comments, on my site, and all the different things they've said about my different books through the years. And the one thing that always keeps coming out, you have, and I've been very blessed to have a lot of great readership and
Mhm.
people love my stuff. But you always have those outliers who put the reviews, oh no, the same old stuff. Here it is, one shot at a time, do your routine. Oh, please stop the madness.
Mhm.
And I was thinking to myself, yeah, they've said that even on my reviews. And I'm going, okay, so you have a few of the outliers. What are you going to do about that? My destiny as a sports psychologist, educator, is to have the ability to reach that one person
Okay.
because they need to hear it the most. They're always poo-pooing it. Nah, this positive stuff, yada, 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 one shot at a time, that doesn't work or whatever. But what they don't realize is that, these sort of mental cliches are the real secret. And that's really why I've actually created this whole notion about being solid. I love acronyms. As you know, I love Dr. Kirschenbaum and Dr. D.D. Owens. They did the SMART golf. SMART stood for
Yeah.
specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time constraint, setting SMART goals.
Mhm.
I hope, we can actually do the same here with being solid. And I've sort of copyrighted all of this, and I really wanted to sort of introduce it, to you on, your program, because I think of all the people I can talk with, they would really appreciate it, like you. But the reason I did this
Well, no, I
is,
wouldn't. May I interrupt real fast? Because the
yeah,
one thing that your style is easy. You make the lessons, they're logical, but you always take the listener and the learner deeper. But then, like a pastor in a way, you always have the podcast. I was looking through your list. It's like 7 keys to great putting and 10 ways to build a strong mindset and all this sort of stuff. And now you've got this acronym, which is cool as well, because a lot of things you've said to me, like purposeful intent and vested indifference. And then you said to me one time, you said, goals should be stepping stones, not stumbling stones. All these sort of, even though they're cliched, they stick. And if the stuff sticks, I feel like that's when the learner can build off that and start to explore the concept in their own ways. And that's where the real gold lies to me, in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%. And that's why I even years ago, I mean 40 years ago, talked about golf was an acronym for gravitating to an optimum level of functioning. and each of us has an optimum level of functioning. So I'm really big on the cliches. We're going to talk about the cliche of KISS here in a little bit,
Right, go.
but this whole notion about, being solid.
Yeah.
So I took a look at that, and I hear players all the time talk about, I really want to be more solid. I really want to, have my game be more reliable. And I thought to myself, okay, how can I actually make this happen? And Mark, how I got this was I was looking at a cheese documentary by Parmigiano Reggiano, and they
Mm.
were talking about making Parmesan cheese, the barrels of cheese in the middle of Italy in this wonderful countryside. How they had, the different pastures, the different cows, the grasses, and they would make this milk. And they went into this huge documentary about what it takes for these cheese artisans to actually make these barrels of cheese. Now, these barrels of Parmesan Reggiano cheese, they're 72 pounds. And I thought,
Okay.
now that's a coincidence. 72 is par, And I thought, well, maybe there's something here. But I kept looking at it. And as, the cheese was being aged, they would take and they would actually tap it after a year. Parmigiano Reggiano is cured for 2 years before they even sell it. And there's some, and I think there was one just opened here in October in Tampa that was 26 years old. There was a barrel of cheese opened up at a restaurant in Tampa. But the point of it was, I thought, okay, everyone wants to be solid, but I think what everyone really has, they don't have Parmigiano Reggiano, they have Swiss cheese. I mean, there's a lot of holes in their game. So we talk about, filling in those holes, those blind spots in the physical game. And I said, how can I actually fill in those blind spots, those holes in someone's mental game? So this is really where solid comes in. So this is sort of the primer, the mental game primer for being solid. So we start with S.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Single mind.
S stands for mental singularity.
All right.
It stands for just this is really what, I need to do right now. Nothing else is more important than this one shot because each shot is its own little mini universe.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think everyone needs to understand is that when you are in that one shot, in that one moment, you are really setting, the focus and the basis for flow. The flow state, isn't just the ability to focus on one thing. It's the ability to actually immerse yourself and actually, slow the brain down so the brain can say, okay, what is it that I need to do to be absorbed here in this moment? So
Hmm.
when people are in this single moment, they're in the present moment. They're not, jumping ahead to the future. They're not thinking about the past. All they are is right now. And let me just kind of just talk just a little bit about this because this is, really something really big,
I would, yeah,
is that
I would say to you as a former competitor, as a longtime coach and instructor, this sounds glorious, but it's hard. It is hard to channel yourself and remain where your feet are. I say to people all the time, stay where your feet are. But the mind is a powerful thing, and thoughts come and thoughts go. And you're right. To be really successful, you have to be singular. But it's so easy to become distracted.
I heard someone say this, and I'm going to paraphrase it, and I wish I could give them all credit. But someone said something about, keeping things simple, right? So we say you need to play simple golf,
Yeah,
but the ability to go out and keep it simple is very, very hard.
yeah.
And I'm going to quote Leonardo da Vinci. He said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
Hmm.
Even there was a Navy engineer by the name of Kelly Johnson, who was the lead engineer for the Lockheed Skunk Works, who created the Blackbird spy planes, the U-2. His quote back in 1960 was, listen, we have to keep it simple, stupid.
Hmm.
But what he meant, he didn't mean simple, didn't mean to be a dolt. It meant simplicity should be a design goal. So when I tell players to be single-minded, the S also stands for keeping it simple. All right.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point about, the mind is that 60% of the time, Mark, we are thinking about the future. We're jumping ahead to what if, what could be, what's my score? And another 15 to 20% is reflecting back into the past. So that only leaves us with about 25% of our energy to be engaged here in this present moment. That's why it's so hard to be engaged in this present moment. And that's why it takes mental discipline and the ability to stay single-minded. All I can do is all I can do, but all I can do is more than enough if I give this shot, this single moment, my best effort. And the biggest challenge I have for all of my players, whether it's juniors, college, tour players, is this notion of you have the ability to control your thoughts, your attitude, your time. It's your time. Make each shot count. But really what society does, they always ask, what'd you shoot? What'd you shoot? So everybody's counting their shots.
Yeah.
They have it backwards. We need to make every shot count. And if you do that, one after one after one until you're done, what you find at the end of the day is that you have a whole heap of success. And if you have that success day after day, you're starting to build some enduring confidence. And that's really what being solid is all about.
Yeah. I want to say that here we go down the rabbit warren you spoke of earlier, because you share the insight, and I listen to you like a competitor and someone who just wants to be better, and like everyone who's tuned into this.
Mhm.
Um, so we have a situation now where, okay, I want to be solid and I want to be singular, but the mind does wander all the way back. I feel like, and I speak on my own behalf here, and maybe for some people listening, that then all of a sudden we feel guilty that that happened. Then all of a sudden we're battling ourselves because, well, I'm supposed to be present, but I'm concerned about the shot I hit back there. And then all of a sudden you're not singular and you're not myopic anyway, because you're wrestling internally with yourself at the fact that you've actually failed at being singular. So please help us.
Well, I think the biggest thing is to realize you're a human being,
Hmm.
and why we are alive is because we are aware of our surroundings 24/7, 365. And so our thoughts will wander. We will gaze off. And so instead of berating ourselves and saying, I shouldn't be doing this, because now you're sort of getting into something we call metacognition. So we have cognition, which is a thought. And metacognition is thinking about my thinking. So when you get yourself caught up thinking, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be thinking like this. This is, improper thinking. Instead of beating yourself up, become aware of it. Just take a nice little gentle breath and bring yourself back into this moment. You
Yeah.
don't have to, to do anything. I always have, this rubber band on. And it's just sort of a nice self-awareness little tool that, when I start to have this distorted, cognition, this wandering thought, I find myself sort of drifting or thinking about other things. I have to be able to catch myself. And it's sort of a nice little reminder. I'll just give it a nice gentle snap and I'll go, ooh, all right, let's get back in here to this moment because this is the only thing I can control. And see, that's the whole point about everything we're talking about. When a person isn't solid, when a person is shaky, what are they filled with? They're filled with doubt, with
Hmm.
worry, with anxiety. They tense up. So what I'm trying to do is, well, I'm trying to remove the doubt, you know, and remove the worry and get you into an action plan of purposeful intent to say, here's what we're doing, continue the course. And I always love, Bill Belichick, the great New England Patriots coach for years. I mean, the one thing he would always say to each one of his players, do your job, do your job. Because the single most important thing that golfers need to remember, what is your task? Your task is to move your ball from point A to point B to point C in the most efficient, effective, and economical manner possible. End of story. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter, the cosmetics or the aesthetics of the shot. It doesn't even matter how you feel about that, really. What you have to realize is that it is a game of just getting the ball in the hole as swiftly and as quickly as you can. And if you do that, Instead of taking all of this psychological chubba lubba and start beating yourself up and holding yourself emotional hostage, you start to really play better, which leads to further, lower scores and more enjoyment.
We spent about 10 minutes on S. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Let's
But
get,
it's a very important one. It gets, solid off to a roaring start.
it sets the groundwork. There's no doubt about that. And by the way, your little rubber band thing, I've
Yes.
used that with students, and I do the same thing. I've got this little band here that says "fearless" on it, and
Yes,
that
I love that.
it brings me back to the present. Okay,
Mhm.
second letter in solid is the letter O, and that stands for optimistic. Um, Off you go.
Well, Winston Churchill one time says the difference between an optimist and a pessimist is that an optimist sees opportunity at every difficulty,
Hmm.
and a pessimist sees difficulty at every opportunity. And so for me, to be optimistic, we're not optimistic people. And we're not, wired to be optimistic or to be positive. In fact, we have a very strong negative bias. I know that there's some research coming out of Stanford that talks about we have about 60 to 66,000 thoughts a day, and more than two-thirds of those, are negative thoughts. And 80% of maybe all these thoughts are negative, and we have 95% of these thoughts are repetitive. So in golf, if you're already negative and you're repeating all of this negative cycle, it's hard to be positive. It's hard to be optimistic. So optimistic, leads to this sense of positivity, this sense of hopefulness, this sense of, hey, I'm going to have, some good things ahead of me. I think optimism is linked with psychological hardiness, which means whatever I'm faced with, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to be, mentally tough, mentally disciplined, that anything that comes my way, I'm going to be optimistic enough and fortunate enough to say, I can handle this. Now, that's really what creating opportunities is all about. Opportunities, are created, by having this purposeful and positive outlook.
Yeah.
And I've never told anybody to go out and be positive or tell anyone to relax. But I have told them, have a plan, be purposeful, create that opportunity and take advantage of that opportunity. Now, I'm not going to be a cockeyed optimist here, Mark, because I know everybody says, well, yeah, you're just being positive. No, you also need to be, the O also stands for objective. You need to realize, really what your talents and your developed abilities are and what your limits and capabilities, truly are. So you're not out there like, some, dandelion, and say, oh, okay, I'm optimistic. I hope everything comes across okay.
Mhm.
No, you got to take a really hard objective look at, who you are, what you're doing, and what can I do in order to become better and to become more solid. So that optimism blended with, objective reality, it's a strong combination.
It certainly is. And I listen to you. It's almost like a renewal of my mind, or of one's mind. When you find yourself being, pessimistic or negative, where you can actually decide to change. But I loved your description there, which I'd never heard before, and you called optimism psychological hardiness. And I'd never considered that, because to be optimistic in the face of adversity, that takes some moxie. I mean, it's way easier to take, the road widely traveled and just go, oh, life is so difficult right now, as opposed to the person that just stands up in the face of the storm and goes, well, I am the storm. Yeah, let's go.
There are so many different attributes. We call them explanatory styles that deal with this optimistic behavior. And I happen to think something that's linked, with opportunity and with being optimistic is being patient, because patience is confidence waiting to happen. And that's the Dr. Bobism. That's something that I created years ago. And the reason why is that patience is the capacity to accept or to tolerate delays, trouble, or suffering
Yeah.
without getting frustrated or getting angry or upset. So patience, linked with this optimistic, perspective, but also understanding is that if I stay patient, If I continue to push forward, if I continue to motivate myself, good things will happen. And that's why it's all sort of linked together.
Mm, I love it. Right, we're moving along. L, letting go. When I read this, I was like, yes. And I'm playing a lot of tennis right now, and the coach is saying to me all the time, he goes, it's great, just loosen up your wrists. Or in other words, give up control a little bit more. And this element of you give up control to gain more control. And it's so anti-instinct. And it's so difficult. And in golf, it's the same thing. I can't tell you how many golf lessons I've given throughout the years when someone's been glued to this golf club like life and death depends on it. And they're just removing the swing from the swing because they're trying so hard to get the club face back to the ball. Where in reality, the mechanics of the swing ask one to let go. Now that's in the physical realm. So I'd love your take on the mental realm as well, please.
Well, L means letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about letting go, we're talking about letting go of over control, letting go of over manipulation, letting go of steering. But it also means letting go of your expectations, letting go of others and what they are doing, letting go of the expectations of others, results, or letting go of trying to impress or please others. Now, letting go also is a synonym for trust. Now, trust and confidence, are both linked together, especially in golf. You hear players talking about trust your swing, trust your decision, trust the process. You hear that all the time. But I'm going to bring it, more into a motor learning, to a golf dynamic movement confidence realm, is that trust is scientifically defined by two great researchers, one sports psychologist, another is a great sports scientist, Dr. Bill Moore and Dr. John Stevenson. Both came out of the University of North Carolina, and I first was introduced to their work back in about 1990, 1991. But they said that trust, in a motor learning, in a movement form, is the letting go of conscious, coercive movement that interferes with those processes that have been overlearned through practice and repetition. So trust, in a layman's term, is simply letting go of trying hard. It's letting go of trying to make something happen. And it really means allow it to happen.
Yeah.
And so we've always heard this phrase, and it's a paradox, is that if you let go of control, you gain more control. And it's almost like anything in life, when we want something so bad, and I see this a lot, and I hear parents, are really trying to, have children, and they're really, talking about getting everything all set up and making the mood right, and they are unable to, conceive. Then they go through the process of adoption, and whether they do adopt or they actually, never, get that far, they end up, having, finding out that they're going to have a baby. So they sort of, things loosen up. And it's the whole point of, when you actually, let go of something, trying so hard, wanting it so bad. I call it the neologisms, I call it triosity and wantism, that
Mm-hmm.
you're trying so hard and you want it so bad that when you finally say, you know what, all I can do is all I can do, but that is more than enough.
Yeah.
And that happened to be a title of a great book by, I think his name was A.I. Williams, and he was a life insurance salesperson. And what he was saying is that every great salesperson knows this, is that when you try to force a sale, when you're trying to close the deal, you're putting too much control into it.
Yeah.
But when you just present them with the goods and you say, this is a great opportunity for you to buy, to purchase this product, and I love this product, instead of having to strong arm them into the sale, they are sort of thinking, yeah, I want this to happen. I really want this product. And I think that's the same thing with letting go. When we actually let go of trying to make something happen and then trust ourselves and trust our bodies and trust our athletic talent, what happens is this magical freedom and this allowance of this motor movement, and we start hitting great shots. And,
Yeah.
and think about it yourself when you were a player, and I've been a player, we played for all of our lives. When we went out and when we really wanted something to happen and we were trying really hard and gritting our teeth, oh man, nothing happened. And then we finally said, oh, the hell with it.
Yep.
And then we just got pissed off to the upper level of pistivity, which is a word I created many years ago. And then you finally sit there and you relax and just say, ah, to hell with it. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. And you let go of trying, and lo and behold, who shows up? The confident golfer within. And you start playing well again. And then at the end of the round, you're going, what happened there? Well, what happened was you were letting go
Yeah.
of trying to coerce, control, and manipulate. You just allowed yourself to play.
You used the word expectation earlier, and I'm going to make this completely physical. Um, just the pure mechanics of golf. You talked about 72 earlier, and that's par is 72, and 72 strokes is a long time, and there's a lot that transpires during those 72 strokes. And if I just wish so many golfers would go into their round of golf and say, okay, I might, like Jack Nicklaus, want to shoot a target score. But that target score is a culmination of many events. And all I can really do, and this is getting back to single mindedness, just do this first one and not worry. If it doesn't work out, I'm still going to be okay because there's another one coming. And it's not like the world sort of depends on this one shot, or I don't have to do everything perfectly because there is some wiggle room. There is some room for creativity. There is some room for making mistakes physically, as long as you don't make the mistakes mentally.
No, I agree with you 100%. And all of the great athletes in other sports that I've had a chance to work with, whether it be NFL players, NBA players, whoever, baseball players, they all say that golf is the most difficult sport because there are so many facets, so many variables. And every day on the golf course, and even yourself, you're changing in milliseconds. I mean, the wind, the environment, your neurochemical makeup, everything's changing. So it's really hard to duplicate or replicate, one day to another. But what most people have to realize, most golfers don't realize this, is that every shot you step up into, no matter if you've hit 200 great shots before, this is not the 201st. This is a new creation. And
Yeah.
every shot is its own little mini universe. And I don't want to, get out here and get too new age on people, but the point of it is that if you think about it, if I give the very best effort for 8 to 10 seconds, I'm talking about the time to step into the ball, to aim, align your body, to look at your target, to fall in love with your target, to become one with your target. If you gave yourself 8, 9, 10 seconds of undivided great focus, of rapture, of falling in love with that target, and you did that 72 times, I'll tell you what, you'd have, one hell of a day, because that's really what we're talking about. Most people think, well, I can't be focused like this for 4 or 5 hours. I'm not saying that. I'm saying on each shot, if you can actually make a plan, then commit to that plan, step in and trust it for 8 to 10 seconds, and let your visual system lock on the target, tell your motor system, this is what I want to do, and then respond, or some people say react to your target. If you do that, you are giving yourself the very best chance of being an athlete, of really becoming one with your target. And that's really what I'm talking about, letting go. And that's where we really build this notion of trust.
You, in a previous podcast, talked about the value of one. Folks, you can go and listen and look for the other shows. I think it might have been Keys to Great Putting. Anyhow, we got to stay the course here. So we 3/4 of the way, or I should say almost 2/3 of the way through. SOL, we get to I of solid, and that is intention, building a platform of purposeful and positive intention. So please elaborate.
Intention is the second prong of focus.
Okay.
When we talk about focus, and a great friend of mine, Dr. Debbie Cruz, who has the Better Your Best program, she is a fantastic exercise physiologist, great sports psychologist. We've been friends for 30 plus years. And she was really one of the pioneers of looking really how the brain, thinks. And she was talking, in her book years ago about the two prongs of focus. One of them was attention, and the other was intention. Now, attention, is energy. It's, the energy that you're actually putting forth to actually stay, awake during this podcast. All right.
Mhm.
Hopefully everybody is engaged with it.
Yeah.
And so if you're in class, years ago, and the teacher says, Mark, look at me, pay
Yeah.
attention to me.
Mhm.
There's an energy cost right there.
Yeah.
Now, the other part of that prong is intention. What is it you want to do with that energy? Where do you want to go? And that's the whole point. When you have attention and intention, intention says, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to do now with, whatever I have to work with right now.
Mhm.
And so when we start talking about having this purposeful intention, you're giving yourself, this direction. Here's what I need to do. Here's what, my options are. I'm making a very clear and purposeful decision. Here's what I'm going to do. And the next part, of I means investment.
Yeah.
I'm going to invest my energy 100% right now into executing, this plan. Now, with that investment and that intention, we're also talking about, commitment and trust. Because when you commit, you can't just commit just a little bit. I mean, a lot of people think they do. You either commit 100% or
Till
you
death do
commit
us
really
part.
not at
Mhm.
all.
Yeah.
That's right.
Until death do us part, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really what intention is. It's just a real vital. I mean, it is sort of uh, the glue that kind of puts everything together about being solid. Is that, when you have, purposeful intention and you have this investment, this is what I'm going to do 100% into this shot. It's going to work out. And I really want to say here to all of, of your listeners, um, this isn't just for low handicap people. I was surprised the other day. I was listening to someone talk about it, and I had to go and find it out for myself. Is that, very few people break 90, and even fewer break 80. And so when we start talking, well, what's this podcast for? Being solid. And, you just must be talking about tour players. No, I'm talking about mid to high handicappers because you can become a lot more mentally, physically, and spiritually solid in your golf game, and especially emotionally solid by
Yeah.
just adhering, to sort of these little stepping stones to success. And that's really what I think, everyone needs to understand is that just this in for, the low handicap players, being solid is being that, 20 handicapper that goes out and has the best day of their life and they shoot 87 and they go, wow, that was really fun. And what they realize is that it really wasn't that much of an effort. They did a couple of things much better, more consistent, and lo and behold, the magic showed up. And that's really, what you and I provide. We know we're sort of, the magicians showing them, sort of a few tricks, but they're the ones pulling the rabbit out of the hat, so to
Mm.
speak. And so they feel good about that. Now, we won't divulge all of our secrets, but that's why they'll keep coming back and listening to us,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Well, yes. And two things spring to mind for me. First off, in the wintertime in the Northern Hemisphere, we're in the throes of football, and I find it I love to watch the they catch the coach who's running to the locker room at halftime, and the on course, the on the field reporter, the sideline reporter goes, "Coach, what are you going to do to be better in the second half?" And they'll be like, "Control the ball, don't fumble it. Run game's got to be more solid." And you're like, "Yes, yes, yes, we know this." But the reality of it is that's exactly what they need to do. It's nothing ethereal. And then along those lines to golf. I mean, you talk about being purposefully intent or having, real um, intent to what you're about to do over the shot. I can't tell you how many players I've seen where now they are forced and they're in trouble and they have to hit the ball low under a tree.
Hmm.
That they'll probably hit it low, but the practice swing before the time is not a rehearsal of what's required to hit the ball low whatsoever. Or if they got a
Right.
high draw, they're not making a swing that goes that way. They're just kind of swinging. So even before the shot, this complete intent to what's about to happen, I barely ever see it, even at the elite level, sadly.
Well, it's something that maybe the listeners don't realize is that obviously you have been around the game for a long time as a player, coach, educator, commentator, you and your brother Trevor, and your dad. Uh, Myself, I have been around the game for so long, and I've had a chance to be with some of the best teachers in the world, and most notably David Ledbetter. But really, what I have seen through the years, whether it be someone like Ernie Els or Nick Price or Greg Norman or Michelle Wie that come in, to see David for a lesson. And I'm not speaking here for David, but I've been, around for a long time, been with him for 25 years and still blessed to be a part, of that wonderful Ledbetter organization, is that they really weren't doing major overhauls. It was just little things, maybe a little thing with the grip, maybe something with the takeaway, something at the top. And that's really what I want everyone to realize here with the mental game. You don't have to have this complete, brain overhaul. You just, need to do a couple of things better to become a little bit more solid.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to help people say, listen, if you could just get a little bit more solid mentally, emotionally, every day when you go out and go play golf, and give yourself sort of a process goal that says, hey, today I'm going to actually try to actually maintain low tones today. I'm not going to be a reactor today. Instead, I'm going to be a responder. I'm going to respond well. And just a funny story here. I had a young tour player is getting ready to go out and get his tour card. And he had hit a shot, out to the right, close to the water. And as we were, getting to his ball, he was going, man, I hope that ball just stays up. I can't believe it. He was sort of, beating himself up,
Hmm.
catastrophizing, and he was putting all of this anxiety on himself. I said, here's something that's going to save you a lot of gray hairs as you play. And I said, it's something that Jack Nicklaus told a friend of mine, Gary Hallberg, years ago. Gary Hallberg was the first uh, four-time first-team All-American, played for
Talented.
Wake Forest.
Mhm.
And so he goes out there and he asks Jack Nicklaus, Jack, is there something here that I need to know? And Jack looked at him and goes, Gary, yes. He goes, you're going to hit thousands of terrible shots in your career. They're going to be ugly. And Gary's going, wow. He said, but at the same time, you're going to hit tens of thousands of really good shots and even thousands more great shots. If you really focus on that, that will give you a great career. So I was telling this story, to my young tour professional. And as we got down to his ball was about 10 feet, from the water hazard, and the ball was sitting up. And I looked at him, I said, let's not catastrophize. Let's not worry about something that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Okay. I said, because that is worrying, poorly. What you need, to be able to do is something I call worry well, is that as you're stepping to your ball, consider that everything's going to work out. And if it doesn't work out, consider that I have, plan B. I can handle this. Whatever happens down here, I can handle it. And so I'm always trying to help a player understand if the ball is, playable, it's effective. That's really all we're looking for. And as many of us who hit balls, into the woods or into, close to the water, what are we saying to ourselves? We're not saying, boy, I hope for a perfect lie. We're saying, just let me find it.
It's okay.
Let me have a chance to play this. All right. And when you find it, you're sitting there going, whoo. Yeah, but the point of it is, don't really just let's not worry about something, that hasn't happened yet, because that's really what worry is. It's false energy put into something that may or may not even happen. So let's not worry about that. And let's make sure we're putting our energy into whatever happens, I'll deal with it, I can handle with it, and I'll move forward with it.
The great philosopher, my father, once said to me when I was a young man, and I remember as a teenager disagreeing vehemently with him, and he was like, I believe if you can see your ball and you can see the target and you got a swing, you got a shot. And I was like, no, That's not the truth. And let me tell you now that I get to work on the tour, and some guy's going to drive it just not in the water up 18 to make par to win. If that ball lands on grass somewhere, it's absolutely fine. It's amazing how my mindset's changed when you look at the game from a different perspective. When you're like, okay, there's like I see a spectrum of shots. There's great, there's good, there's average, there's usable, there's not good, there's poor, and then the only real bad shot's the disaster, which the next one comes out of your hand. Otherwise, if the ball's playable, you got something still.
And that's a concept I call learned effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be great, but you do have to keep the ball in front of you, and you have to actually just keep moving it from point A to point B to point C. And
Yeah.
how many times have we all come up to a shot where a commentator, in the past goes, he or she has no shot. There's no shot here at all. But through the
Talking about
creative,
me?
yeah, no, no, not you, Mark, but the creative artistry of golfers. I mean, they are artisans, they are craftsmen, and they are great at their skill. Now, they may not have a lot of options, and they may only have one option, but they see it, and that becomes very clear. And so the brain sort of picks that up, and they see you hit this low little fade that runs up to the green, and people go, wow, I didn't see that at all. Well, they saw it because they saw that as a workable option. And I think that's really what we do, with a really clear mind. We keep our options open and we create our opportunities.
I would say that's the perfect segue to the period on the end of solid. The final letter D, and D is you've listed is decisive, determined, driven. Have
And
at it.
that's really, and that's the pursuit of personal mastery, to be decisive. To me, the first thing we have to do on any golf shot, we have to start with the plan. And I always have quoted John Wooden on this. He says, if you fail to plan, you're just planning to fail.
Yeah.
And I've always loved that because, when you have a clear and purposeful plan and you're decisive on that plan, from behind the ball, what you have done right there is create state or in the moment confidence. You have created confidence by your decisiveness to say, this is the shot I see, this is what I'm going to commit to, and this is what I'm going to trust. And the reason why you want to be decisive is that being decisive, you eliminate the doubt. And doubt is the opposite of confidence and trust.
Mm-hmm.
So when you actually eliminate the doubt and you become very clear on your intent and you step into the ball and you have this determined and driven mindset, this motivating aspect that says, this is what I'm going to do, you now are in pursuit of personal mastery. And I've always loved the Satchel Paige story, the great baseball player, from, the 30s and 40s, who was 43 years old before he signed his first Major League Baseball contract with the Cleveland Indians. And he was 43 years old, and he went into rookie camp, and the players asked him, they go, Satchel, how old are you, man? And he looked at him, he goes, well, boys, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you was? He says, he says, age is mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that, many years ago at a sports psychology conference. But I started thinking about that. How good would you be if you didn't know how good you had to be?
Mm.
How good would you be if you didn't know how good you need to be? So this whole notion about, hey, being in the moment and being driven, this is really what personal mastery is all about. How good will you allow yourself to be? And I think for all of us, when, the more solid you become in your mental game, it shows up in your physical game.
Yeah.
I see so many players getting so statified. And statified, again, is a neologism
Mm-hmm.
for statistics.
Yeah.
And they start, oh, I have to measure this, I have to measure that. And we're looking at all these greens and regulation, three-putt avoidance, and I love all of that data. But I think even more important is, the personal, mental statistic. Were you there mentally, emotionally, spiritually for every shot in golf? And I've asked a lot of my tour players that, and they all respond with one thing.
No, yeah.
No,
Mhm.
no. Is that even possible? I'm going, it is, but it takes a lot of mental discipline. And when you finally learn it and you learned about being solid, it's amazing, what happens because there is a metamorphosis. There is a transformation, of that player. Now, golf isn't so hard. Golf now is a wonderful process about finding out how good I'm going to allow myself to be today. And that's, my whole mission statement. That's what Dr. Bob Winters is all about, is to help players of every level, talent level, handicap level, to find out how solid of a player you can be.
Well, you definitely have helped us to begin to build a solid mental game. But I want your parting shot to be this because I know what it's like. I've been a young aspirant golfer. Heck, I'm still aspirant. I have my
Mhm.
goals in life still. We all do. And then you get something like this, and you sit under the counsel of a mentor, a bright man like yourself, and you have your notes, and the future's bright now because I got these things I'm going to do, and then you go and work on them, and then it doesn't work out. I want you to bring the real truth now, please, and help. This was younger me. If I was writing a letter to dear younger Mark, I would say
Mhm.
to myself, I'm like, all this work that you're doing, you're stacking the odds in your favor. This is not the silver bullet. It's not going to work. It might not, but it's unlikely to work right away. But if you do this consistently and you're disciplined about this, in the end, when you look back over the entire thing, you will have found that this was a watershed moment and things started to go in the right direction.
I can address that, with 100% certainty. I've seen it thousands of times over the years. I mean, everyone talks about, all the success, that people have had with their athletes. I've had unbelievable success with so many athletes for 3, 4 decades now. Also, I've had athletes who didn't make it, who, really wanted the dream, and they always ask me, who makes it to the PGA or the LPGA tour? I said, I'm not Nostradamus. I'm not God. I don't have a crystal ball. All I can tell you is that the players who believe they belong there find a way to get there pretty close. And even if they don't, the players along the way, have actually gotten into other areas of maybe golf management or golf education or have gone, into, business, Fortune 500 companies. But the lessons they've learned along the way, such as, lessons about being solid, they actually have transferred all of those skills from golf skills, and they're basically life skills. And they actually have helped them, become successful maybe in another endeavor. And I got to tell you, it's a tough, when people say, well, I didn't get my card. And that's, brutal because we see the heartbreak and we see the joy, the absolute, it's just they break down when they finally realize their dream is realized. And I've been there a lot of times with those players. A lot of people just don't realize how mentally exhausting and how brutally emotionally devastating the game of golf is because golf doesn't care. It's the greatest game ever invented, but it's also an unfair game.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't care how talented you are, how hard you work, or whatever. And the one thing you've got to ask yourself is, do I do I really love it? And what is it, that I love about it? And I think most of us, we want to find out how good we can be. It's a great game of challenging ourselves. Every day we go out, what will today bring, for me? And if your head and your heart and your soul is really invested to say, you know what? I'm going to believe in myself 100% today. And I think that's really the goal. Will you allow yourself to believe, in your talent and have some fun with it? Because at the end of the day, at the end of your life, you want to sit back and go, you know what? I had a pretty solid life. I did a lot of great things, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Win, lose, or draw. I think anyone who really plays this game and aspires to become as good as they can,
Mhm.
that's what I think the true definition of a winner is
Mhm.
that how can you lose in this game? It's such a great game. I think the people that really lose in this game are the people who are sitting there And they're sitting here going, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And that means, that my work continues and yours as well.
So go ahead and build a solid mental game, folks. Oh, and what you must also do. This man, you can access him, you can find him, you can work with him, but you can also read all of his books. So you got countless books, Dr. Bob. I'm trying to catch up with you. Tell folks where they can find the books first off, please.
They can find the books at, any, major bookstore like Barnes and Nobles. They can go to Amazon.com. All of my books are there. The Mental Art of Putting, Mistake-Free Golf, the
That was
Ten
a podcast.
Commandments.
That was a
Yes.
podcast, folks. Mistake-free golf. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, mistake-free golf. And so they can find me, and they can actually find me at my website, theconfidencedoctor.com. They can find me at davidledbetter.com, or you can just Google me. And I tell you what, as you and I have always talked about, Mark, our who do we love to work with? We love to work with people who want to get better.
Mm.
That to me, because those are our favorite students.
Well, if there's a lessons or more lessons from the best or lessons from the best too, you're probably going to be in it again.
Well, I
Don't
hope so. And I tell you what, I wish you, unbelievable success just going through, your book. It's such a primer. Just so many different dimensions, so many great teachers, players. I mean, you've covered, all the bases. So yeah, hopefully there is, lessons from the best too. And I would, be honored to be in that as well. I feel very privileged to be in, your first book. And I wish you much, much success here, especially here in the holiday season. For all you listeners, if you need, a book, get Mark's book, Lessons from the Best. And
stop.
if you read about me in there a little bit, think about, hey, some good things about Dr. Bob Winters too, okay?
Fantastic stuff as always, Dr. Bob. I really, really appreciate you coming on. You know what? More than anything else, you talked about, people save some stuff for themselves. I spend a lot of time around a lot of bright minds and a lot of folks. They kind of just tease you with nuggets. You just empty the encyclopedia on us. So I appreciate you very much for doing that. Thank you.
Well, well, you're more than welcome. And the point of it is that I just before I go out of this great, great planet, and go into hopefully, my next, adventure
Mhm.
beyond. There's just I want everybody to understand, I just have so much more to give. There's just so much to explore. And I think I can't remember if it was Socrates who said, true wisdom is knowing that you really know nothing, and we're always learning, true? And so that's why I've always said, to people, it's important that you get your mind in the right place. And that's why my trademark is, you change your mind, you change your game.
You're such a
And
pro. That's how I kicked this entire podcast off, and you just wrapped us with the same statement. Man, well, I appreciate you.
fantastic, Mark. Mark, thank you for having me on. And I wish you much continued success. I'll see you on the fairways.
Thank you, my friend.